And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Melissa Tittl, former head of content at GAIA and writer and producer for content on Netflix, History Channel, Discovery Channel, and Paramount Studios. She has worked on Ancient Aliens, Ancient Civilizations, and most recently, Dr. Joe Dispenza's new movie, Source. She has also recently released her own movie called Code 12, which incorporates mind-altering understandings of the universe we live in. Melissa, thanks for joining me. It's great to have you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this.
Well, how did you get into all this stuff like Ancient Aliens and Ancient Civilizations and working at Gaia? Did you have your own spiritually transformative experience earlier in life?
I didn't have a dramatic experience where, aliens landed in the front yard or anything like that. I wish I did. That would be this would be a better story to tell. But I had, I think from a young age, I always felt that there was something more to life. Especially when you're young and you look at adults and you think, okay, this is what I have to do all this work to become. And then it looks like that life seems limited. I think that was always a concept in my head. Also, my family was really open. My dad was in the military for a while. We talked about aliens. My parents taught me about every single kind of religion. We would have deep conversations about mythology. I mean, ever since I was a little girl. So getting out in the real world, and my degree being in TV and film, and wanting to express what I wanted to say in the world. I mean, it kind of seemed natural that I would go that route. I mean, I think one of my first jobs, I worked for NBC, and it was like a news show, right? It was like NBC 5 o'clock news or whatever. And I was running one of the cameras, I was like 22, something like that, 22. And I thought, I never want to do this. It feels staged. Everything is so boring. It's like, this is what's happening in the news. And then there's the weather and somebody's dog. And I was like, wow, this is not interesting. Like, I can't wait to go deeper into whatever I'm supposed to be in. And everything just kind of fell in place for me, to be honest with you. Anytime I tried to veer off that path, I think at one point in Hollywood, I was working on a bunch of different shows. I had left Paramount at that time. And I was so frustrated with the industry that I started a cookie company. I was just making cookies. And I was like, I'm quitting. And I remember getting a psychic reading. And the woman said, oh, no. She's like, your cookie business isn't going anywhere. You're going to start producing again. And I said, no, I'm done. Right? She's like, no, you are. And then when you start this show, it's going to be the rest of your life. And I said, okay, whatever. She's full of crap. And then literally 2 weeks later, I got a call for Ancient Aliens, and they said, we really want you. You worked on this show for NASA, and we think it'd be a nice compliment with this, Ancient Aliens show. And it did. I never left that path. That path just kept going.
When working on a show like Ancient Aliens, what would you do? Like write the scripts or what?
At that time, so I started on in the first season. The first season was only 6 episodes because I think History Channel thought it was going to be a gigantic failure. And of course it's not, because it's 19 seasons. And at that point I was a producer. So as a producer, you would come up with all the concepts. So you would, obviously it was the first season. So the guy who owned the company had some ideas of some things he wanted to cover. And then you would come up with the concepts, write the outline, do all the research. And then you would hire a writer to take on the final form of that script so that you could start working on the next episode. And as a producer, not only were you coming up with the material, writing the outlines, and trying to figure out what the flow is, but then you were also doing the interviews, and you were finding the people and reading their books and who would be a good fit to talk about it, XYZ.
It seems like Giorgio was the host of the show in some sort of way. Would you say that this was his show, or was he financially invested in this?
Financially, I don't know, but Giorgio had a magazine, and I'm just blanking on the name. He had a magazine that this production company, I think, optioned as a basis for what the show's, what the show was going to cover based on what his magazine was called. And I'm just literally blanking on what it's called.
I guess it's not Ancient Aliens.
It's definitely not Ancient Aliens. It's called something else. So he's definitely, the show was not set up to have one host, but he is the main character because that was his magazine that everything started being based on, and then it just took off and had its own cadence.
Are there a lot of women working in this field with this type of content?
No. There's definitely more than there was 2 years ago. I feel like more women are popping up here and there as journalists or certain expertise, and I'm excited about that. I think that, the main issue, I think, is that women talk about things differently than men talk about things. That doesn't mean that the research is invalid, but most of our ears and our minds are used to how men speak about things, how they logistically get from A to B to C. And that has become our protocol for how we create reality. If something's real, they're able to logically explain from A to B to C. And women, highly educated women, sometimes do not speak that way. They sometimes go to A to C, and then they go back to B, and then they go back to C. And that cadence, I think, especially working for History Channel for so long, just wasn't accepted by the public. But now I think we're coming to an understanding that there's definitely a plethora of women in different facets of expertise that add to that logistical conversation that men have, that give it a new way of looking at the universe or a certain expertise.
Well, let's talk about your new movie, and I believe it's based on a dream that you had, correct? Can you tell my audience about your dream?
Yes. So I feel like anybody listening, you probably have had dreams or synchronicities in your life, or things that have happened in a way that all of a sudden when you're older, you start to put things together that, wait, something happened to me. Something has been trying to contact me in a very strange way. And because when you're younger, you really can't figure that out. You just know maybe it's a little off, but you can't necessarily put the pieces together. So for me, I started having a reoccurring dream from 10 years old until mid-20s. And it was always the same thing. It was it was me. I was the POV of the character. And I would look at my hands in the dream, and I had some weird kind of roby looking clothes on, and I was carrying a staff, and I was in a certain looking desert, kind of with rolling sand, nothing, absolutely nothing anywhere. And I'd walk to a location and put the staff in the ground, into the sand. And when I did that, these concentric circles would kind of ripple out from that staff. And then 12 spokes would come from the staff out to the edge of those concentric circles. And then it would kind of like light up, and then it was done. And I didn't think anything of it until, to be honest with you, until I really started working on Ancient Aliens, because my job was to find material and to put the dots together, right? And I started seeing those concentric circles in everything, right? I mean, they're in like every culture, no matter how old, whether it's a cave painting from 50,000 years ago that they found, or on any temple or any ancient text, there's some kind of concentric circle. So that was the first time in my mid-20s where I thought to myself, that symbol I have had in my head for a very long time. And the minute I started to question it, I never had that dream again, ever. Like there's never a reoccurring dream of the same thing ever again.
When you say it's a reoccurring dream, how often would you have it?
I mean, often. I'm thinking back to when I was younger. I mean, it seemed like a lot. I mean, I can't say it was every night, but when I would think about that dream, I'm like, well, the fact that I'm thinking about it, it must have been many, many, many times. Because it wasn't like 10 years old and then, 13. It was very often. And I think at one point, when I was a teenager, I got a bunch of books on hieroglyphs. And I was really interested in Egypt stuff. And I started painting them on the walls. And my mom said, we don't know what that means. Let's take them down. I didn't really know what that meant, but it was becoming an obsession even when I was younger.
Would you say that you had the dream hundreds of times?
That seemed about right.
Do you think it's possible that the dream is either a past life memory or an implant memory pre-birth? That this is something that you need to be, it's like a mission for you to be involved with?
I mean, that's a really good question. I think my brain would go to, this is probably a past life, and I'm remembering something that I knew how to work. I understood some kind of knowledge that I lost. When you come back into the cycle, you forget, you spend your whole life trying to remember. But it could have been a situation where all of a sudden I maybe got activated. But then again, it would have always been in me all the time. And I think that's a really important statement to say, because I think, you have a lot of really interesting people that come on your show. And for people that haven't had any kind of experience that seems out of the normal, I think that we all have these really deep understandings of what we're supposed to bring to the table, what we're supposed to bring to this strange life that we're all living, this contribution, if you will. And some of us get woken up from strange experiences faster than others. But all of us, I believe, are born with that potential, that deep understanding that only that person knows that is coming, that has come here to know, to express to the world.
Well, we kind of mentioned that your movie is based on your dream, but can you give my audience more of a synopsis of what it's about?
Yeah, of course. So the dream became an impetus for putting together many pieces. So I'd have to say that putting together this movie was over the course of 10 years, because I can't let something go if it feels so odd and strange. And I'm not going to try to explain it or try to put it in a show unless I know what it is. So over the course of 10 years, I started putting pieces together. And so what this movie is about is the idea that the only thing that makes sense to me, as an investigative journalist, I've done alien stories, abduction stories. I've covered the idea of a simulation and a matrix. Ancient civilizations, who built what, why is it built, what is it aligned to, why is it aligned to that? I've covered all of that. And the thing that keeps me up at night is, why is this happening? Why does this even exist this way? What is the why? And there's tons of answers for that. And I think everybody contributes, like I said before, to this greater understanding of why we're here. But this movie is my understanding or a pattern that I have uncovered throughout all the sciences, all the ancient texts, and most of the temples, that points to some kind of code that we're living in. And the ancients left it behind, so at some point we could figure out what that code was and how to override it. So it's as if we're living in some kind of simulation that we no longer need, but we all still consciously believe in it. And so therefore its constructs are pretty deep within our existence.
Do you feel that the ancients left us this code on purpose?
I believe the ancients left us this code on purpose. And I think that they left it behind because, but this is not my research. This is other people's research about something that happened. Either a meteor hit the planet, the poles shifted, or that happened after the meteor hit the planet, there was a massive flood, whatever, there was a cataclysm. And I think people knew that the end was near for that cycle, and they wanted the next wave of humans that were starting over to not forget what they are privy to, the knowledge that they, if they understand it, they will be able to override the system.
One of the most fascinating things to me about your movie was that it talks about a 13th astrological sign. I don't even know if I could pronounce that, but can you expand on that?
Well, it's either the 13th sign is Ophiuchus or Fucus, however you say it. So I said both of them. So if somebody pings me that I said it wrong, there you go. So one of the things that we set up in the movie is that there's a pattern of 12. There's a pattern of 12 in our DNA, our original DNA set, not the one that we're using now. In quantum physics, in our understanding of ancient texts, in how buildings are calculated, and also the zodiac is 12. But we have 12 zodiac signs. But we actually, in ancient times, had 13. And you can see this clearly. This is in the movie too. We talk about the Temple of Dendera and how there is a 13th sign in the ceiling, the famous zodiac. It's the circle, and in the middle is Ophiuchus, and Ophiuchus is the 13th sign. He's also on the ceiling of Dendera, where they have all the zodiacs, and right where Ophiuchus is supposed to be in the timeline of the 13th is in between November and December. So it's a very short kind of window between the end of November and December. That's kind of where it's placed right now with our 12 zodiac. And in ancient times, that's exactly where they put it. Now, there's a contemporary reason for why we don't have the 13th month. We don't have the 13th zodiac, and that is something that happened in Roman times when they kind of like, no, this is what we're doing, and we're setting it, and we're getting rid of all that stuff. But the 13th, in this movie, we talk about the pattern of 12 being a really important idea of a structure that the ancients left behind for us, and the 13th being the center, the way out. In quantum physics, how space and time transcend or traverse is through the center of a 12-pointed sacred geometry shape, a dodecahedron. So if we get into the concepts of mythology and ancient texts, the 13th is prevalent in every single one of them. Whether it's the 13th day of the month is dedicated to Shiba, which is the destroyer and the creator, which makes total sense. It's also right in front of CERN. When you drive into CERN, you see, who do you see? Dancing Shiva, right?
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And because it's the concept of, well, what is the one thing that can traverse time space? That is the changer, the destroyer, the creator, right? To destroy and then create the next set of 12. I don't want to like boggle people with too much of the number stuff, but the 13th is also related to feminine energy. The cycles of the moon were really timed out more to 13 months. This concept that getting rid of the 13 was kind of getting rid of this lost component of our understanding of ancient wisdom, of ancient spiritual technology, not something physical. I'm talking about our bodies and how we can control our human potential. And also in quantum physics, this female component is that the magnetic component, right? So it's as if we just kind of took a piece of parts of how the universe really works, and we put it into a construct, and that construct has hard edges and finite opportunities and possibilities. But our real connection, our soul's connection, our eternal natural connection to the stars and to even our planet is a different set of numbers. And 13th is kind of that key. It's kind of that thing that we've all been programmed to think of as evil or odd, or 13, Friday the 13th, something bad's going to happen to you. All that is programming to stay away from this this number that's coded in your head to something that you're not supposed to open. You're not supposed to go there. And that was on purpose, because if you do learn how to traverse time space, you do know how to reprogram a system, you better be the right person to do it, because if you are at this lower understanding of how the universe works and you jump too quick into it, bad things would happen to you. And this is what also the ancients talk about in the Book of the Dead. There's a book of the 12 gates that I think is in the tomb of Seti I, where they really explain you can't necessarily leave gate 12. Like, they tell you all the things that you must learn how to do before you can get to the next gate. And once you pass all the tests, you can go, you can leave, you can come back, you can go out there and grab information and come back to the system. You can reprogram your system. And I mean, I'm putting those words are not necessarily translated in hieroglyphs, but that was the point. So if you think about where we are now, the fact that you and I are having a conversation about the idea of a simulation, if we are all simulated beings, why is it that I can even have that conversation? A simulation that wants to keep it a simulation would not want its simulated beings to know that it was a simulation. I mean, you'd be out of code, right? You'd just be erased or reprogrammed.
Yeah.
So there's a component here that we are not supposed to stay blind. We are supposed to know how the universe works. And there's a little bit of a buffer time or an educational time of what that means.
If at a certain point we all come to the conclusion that the simulation is real, what do you think would happen?
Well, every time we talk about the simulation, I love talking about this idea with my neighbors who are not into any of this. And I love talking with people who are. And at first it becomes a scary conversation, because if we are a simulation, that means everything that is around us isn't real. Like that my kids aren't real, the love of my life isn't real, like going to a job isn't real. Well, there is a part of our reality that in a sense is not real. Like fear is just an illusion. But we're playing a game, and there's a reason for that. And, we can come up with many ideas. That's not necessarily what my documentary is about, but there's lots of people who talk about the reason for us being here in this experiment, if you will. But what I think will happen is if we figure out we're in a simulation, the next question would be, well, why? And I think that if it's discovered, as if, I'm sure you have a lot of people that come on here and talk about, well, when's disclosure going to happen? When is the president going to open the door, stand at the podium and say, aliens are real, and we've known about it for a long time, we're really sorry, they're here, they're at the White House, they're going to come out now and do a speech. You know what I mean? Like, when is that going to happen?
Yeah.
I think, like, when are we going to really figure out that we're living in this? I don't think any of us are going to perish. I don't think we're really going to end our lives. We're going to start to we're really going to see what the universe is made of for the first time. And we have to be ready for that. This idea that we have interdimensional beings that people are interacting with, but we don't have any control, isn't necessarily true, because we are part of that understanding of the universe. We're just cut off from having the senses to actually be in that interdimensional existence with them. So that's what I'm saying. If everyone, the president comes out of the White House and says, hey, we live in a simulation, and this is why we've discovered we live in one. The things that we believe we have to find evidence for, we are going to start to believe. Our consciousness will change overnight. We will be able to change the construct of what we live in. You have to think of every living being has a construct for its existence. You've probably heard people talk about their auric fields. It's a construct. You're living in a construct. You have the ability to change your construct, but you still have one. Every living being, everything has a construct. So it's not that we won't live without one. But what the information is in that construct is what we have control over.
I'm glad you brought up fear, because there was a point in your movie where it talked about fear is encoded in our DNA. Can you expand on that?
So we had I interviewed a guy named Dr. Jerry, and he specifically talks about, he's found evidence. He's working on a project at Stanford. He's a geneticist. And he's specifically talking about how our design, our human design, is supposed to be coded to 12 strands of DNA, but we only have 3. We only have 3 that are activated. And you know, he has a theory that there's a reason for that. At one point we were cut off and didn't have access to those strands. And the only thing that would stop us from investigating that would be fear, would be the idea, well, you know, humans are always curious. The human species cannot sit still. What am I going to do with this plot of land? Well, now I'm going to build a city, or I'm going to imagine blah, 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 right? So the only thing that would stop them from really figuring out their human potential would be fear. And so the idea that someone or something had controlled our species to a lower count of DNA and then encoded these concepts of the stars and gave us these structures, that the fear would be encoded that if you tried to go out of that something bad would happen to you. And that is ingrained in our consciousness and stunted in our DNA.
So it sounds like that they put that there to hold us back on purpose.
That's what it sounds like. Yes.
Now, this guy, Jerry, is he the one that wanted to kind of remain mysterious or something like that?
Yeah. Everybody.
And why is that? What was going on with that?
Everybody gives me so much crap about that scene. So I want to preface by saying, and I had, you know, we did a movie screening for Code 12 a couple weekends ago, and we had like 420 comments on the movie. And I tried to go through every single one of them because it's important. It's a conversation. It's a community that we need engagement. And a lot of people were like harping on this Dr. Jerry scene where he's in a barn, a remote barn in the middle of nowhere, and I ride my motorcycle up to see him. So I want to say that when I shot that interview, he was very mysterious. I mean, now you can find him all over the place. He's teaching his 12-strand DNA stuff all over. Yeah, I think you can take his course if you want to. And you can look him up after this interview if you want to. But at the time, he was very mysterious. I couldn't get the guy on the phone. I had to go around. I had to find somebody that knew him. His email and his site was like undetectable. He put one up for a little bit. I was able to see his stuff because somebody said, "Hey, have you seen this guy?" And then he took everything down. He said the government was trying to take his protocol, his prototypes and stuff. So all of that is true. He's very, very secretive. So I said, well, let's meet in Nevada. I won't come, you don't have to come to your house, your office. We'll meet somewhere. So my team got us a barn. And because of his caginess, I said, well, we'll just meet in the barn, and, he played right into it. So, but it's like, it's a very odd scene, right? Where he's just like, "You're late." And I'm like, okay.
Well, did he ever reveal to you why he was like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, he was really afraid that, by the way, this happens, and I'm not trying to get into government conspiracy land here, but this happens to mostly anybody that I think has kind of cracked a little bit of the case, if you will. The government will come and offer you money for your prototypes. He had like a 30-page peer-reviewed, or not peer-reviewed, he was about to do peer review and then he got scared, but a paper of all of these kind of prototypes to ignite some of that kind of dead DNA that we didn't have access to. And you know, even when he allowed the interview to happen, I went to his office finally. When I made the movie, he still wouldn't give me like the PDF, like the big high res PDFs for the movie. So I had to put in the watermarked small files into the movie because he still wouldn't give me the high res because he thought I was going to give them to somebody. But I think that this happened. I mean, most of the people that I think that they have cracked the case a little bit, they all either have had conversations with the government or are trying to hide what they have from the government, or they get offers. They get cash offers for some of their information that they have. And again, I'm not trying to go into government conspiracy, but this happens to a lot of people. And he really was like, no, this cannot get into the wrong hands. And so he was pretty close to his chest about everything. And in fact, at the time, I think he hadn't done an interview with anybody at that moment when we shot that. I mean, but now he's all over the place.
Speaking of devices, there was another man that had something called the Rasha device or Rasha treatment. And I think that had to do with something about activating your DNA or something like that. Did you get one of those treatments? And if so, how did your body or how did you respond to it?
Oh my God. So there's two guys in the film. There's Dr. Jerry, who created his machines called the Rasha. There's another guy called Don Estes who created a similar machine, but he's testing how your voice actually creates your structure, like how your voice is the component that picks up the frequency and then creates your actual field. And I've tried both of their devices. Don Estes's was really interesting because you can't hide your true feelings, even if you're a good actor, because they program themselves into your actual auric structure. And then Dr. Jerry, with the 12-strand DNA, he has the Rasha machine. So I did try his machine. Look, I'm into being a guinea pig for anything. So I was like, yeah, let's try this machine. So I'm in the machine. Your eyes are closed. You're on a kind of oscillating bed. Like you can feel currents running up and down your body. And there's a device that has its sound, but the sound is coded to light, even though your eyes are closed purposely. But you can feel the light like hitting your eyes, as it's like creating patterns or something. And I felt really relaxed, and I felt my spiritual body, soul, I don't know, like not my physical body, but my, well, for the sake of the conversation, my soul, like start to like leave like my body. Like I felt like it was moving. It was so crazy. Although I was still in my physical body, but this part was moving. And all of a sudden I felt myself hit a wall. Like no joke, like physical, like, oh. And I thought, oh my God, I'm hitting the outside of the structure. But I wasn't done with the documentary. So I had a little bit of a complex that I didn't know what this was going to take me to do. I didn't know if it was going to change my consciousness. And I wasn't ready because I needed to finish the movie so that I was able to translate the information in the most simplest way. If you watch this movie, you're thinking, this woman did not explain this in a simple way, but in a way that I could keep it grounded. So what I did was I started, because I didn't want to leave the wall, I started fighting it. So I wouldn't allow myself to, and then it became like, it just became like so much pressure that I'm like, I have to get out of the machine. So whatever the machine does, it literally moves you, I think, through, I don't even want to speak for Dr. Jerry or his work, but it almost felt like, although my physical body was still in this dimension, it was as if my soul body was going through all the dimensions. And when I hit a wall, that's where I thought, okay, I'm gonna revisit this after the movie's done. So I guess I owe Dr. Jerry a visit.
So are you saying that if you would have relaxed, you would have went through the wall?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think you would have had an out-of-body experience?
I think so. I think so. I think it's nothing but bliss. But you know, I'm such a purist that way. I don't want one experience to dictate a whole train of thought. Like I really wanted to be neutral about it. There's something weird going on. That's why I started the documentary. I'm creating a pattern. I didn't want to go too far out there where I wasn't bringing the information in a grounded way. I did the same thing with Dr. Joe Dispenza. And, you know, that whole documentary was the scientific discovery of what's happening to your cells when you meditate. We have brainwaves and everything in the documentary, but it was really like getting people's blood samples before, during, and after and seeing how the cells changed during just intentions and thoughts alone. I did not do a retreat by myself until I was done with that documentary, because I wanted to make sure that I was scientifically, or from perspective that was outside, looking at all the parts. Because if you start to really get to believing something too much, then you kind of lose the plot. You're just trying to convince people that this is true and I'm right and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to do that, because it's not up to me to decide what people think is right or wrong. It's up for me to divulge a new way of thinking. And if that's something that belongs in the zeitgeist, then it will. And if it doesn't, then it won't.
What is the main takeaway that you want people to have after watching your movie?
The greatest compliment that I get is, wow, I never thought of that before. That's really it. That is, I just want people to look at people that are really deep into this esoteric knowledge. Let's just face it, we've been talking about the same things and how the same things work for a good 80, 100 years since the spiritual movement, right? So I just want people to look at it a little different. If they start to look at it a little different, they start to look at all the little pieces of their life different. And if my mission would be just to allow people to start to see things a tiny bit differently, not because not because what I'm saying is right, but because if it breaks them out of their monotony of X, you know, A equals B equals C, then we can create a new way for humanity to understand the universe that they live in. And that when someone says, wow, I had no idea, I had never thought of that before, that is the greatest compliment. That's the greatest compliment. And I hope that leads that person to start looking at the research, their life, little things around them in a different way.
I'm assuming that's why people love TV shows about the Bible, the pyramids of Egypt, ancient history, and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a piece of us that we're not sure why we know it's true. We have a system set up today where science and institutions depict if the reality is real based on who did it and how they did it. And if science proved it and then it got accepted, then it must be true, right? That's our total way of deciding if this is reality or not. But there's this whole other part of reality that we're just not tapped into. And I think that those institutions are now, I mean, Harvard just published that article. Every time I bring this up in an interview, somebody leaves in the comments, you know, this is what they meant by that article. But Harvard published that article about how, you know, aliens could walk among us. Now, I know they were doing a scientific experiment, but why waste Harvard's money asking such a question if you're just telling people it's fake? It's literally like a bunch of scientists being like, I can't explain all this new information about quantum physics. None of it makes any sense. What if fairies and aliens and things living underground and all that stuff, what if it's all real? What if it's all real? What if Bigfoot lives in the forest? And they're like, let's publish a paper about it. like the fact that they did means that they can't actually logically, through our scientific processes of deciding what reality is, actually take all the information that they are now getting about the universe and trying to fit them into our logical practices of what reality is. It's not working. So they're like, okay, well, let's just throw it out there and see what the public thinks.
After doing all those shows that you've done and read the books and researched it all, you must have changed big time spiritually. Can you tell us about how you've changed?
I think the one thing that changes when you start to research things deeper, and if you watch this movie and you're like, okay, maybe we do live in a simulation, you start to kind of you start to pull back a little bit. You start to be like, okay, well, what is important in a really meaningful way? Not that everything's fake and so stupid. No, not that. But what I think the one thing that has changed about me is that the more knowledge, the deeper I go, the more things I discover. You know, there's never any end to the truth. There isn't one truth. It's impossible. There's many truths. So the deeper I go into that, I just realize I push back in my life and I appreciate things that I didn't appreciate when I didn't know those things. And I'm talking about just human relationships, or, you know, why do I need to be on social media so much? And, you know, why am I not connecting to other things? Like, I really think about that, because if you know more, the purpose of you knowing more is so that you can teach it, not so that you can have all that information, so that you can express it. And to express it, you've got to take a lot of time to pause. You can't be about yourself or about the things that make up the three-dimensional world all the time. You've got to kind of pull back from that. And I think that's really how it changed me. I pulled back from that. I had this exciting life in LA when I lived in LA. You know, I was going out and to premieres and to rap parties, and I had some really cool heels, and I still love that stuff. But none of that really gets me excited as much as connecting to things, people and nature. Like, that's how it changed me. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but it literally, it changed me into such a deep level that sometimes when I'm at a party or a get together and I know none of these people are thinking about any of that, it actually makes me uncomfortable. To be in a group of people that are only worried about things that, like, I'm actually trying to have a human experience, and they're trying to have some kind of illusion.
Have you ever found yourself going down any of these rabbit holes, the simulation, aliens among us, entities, whatever, where it actually became disturbing for you?
Yes. Some of the alien stuff is disturbing. I'm not really afraid of what I'll find. I'm afraid of things that I can't see not wanting me to release things. I think that's where it gets.
Can you say that again?
I'm not afraid of what I find. So the deeper I go into a story, somebody tells me something really crazy, or a government official comes to me and they're like, you know, this is the truth, right? I'm not afraid of that. What I am afraid of is not even the government. I'm afraid of things that I cannot see, for the sake of the conversation of what we're talking about, I guess aliens, not wanting me to release that, because I can't necessarily control that situation. And that to me is when it's weird. This just happened recently. I discovered, I put something together that I never thought of in several alien cases that I had covered a long time ago. And I reached out to somebody and I said, I really want to do a piece on this. I think it'd be really interesting. It's a new take on this anomaly that's happening. And I had a terrible dream that night. And, you know, not my wonderful dream with the staff or anything. a terrible dream with like just weird creatures and stuff. And I knew it was like, just leave it alone. Just pause, just back away. Because I think that when it comes to, sometimes it's not necessarily people, it's what works through people that scares me more than anything. If I'm diving into something with ancient Egypt and whatever it is doesn't want to come out because of whatever reason, and somebody, a human, might be trying to stop me from doing whatever I'm doing, but I don't think it's necessarily them. I think it's something that works through them. I hope that's making sense. That's what scares me more than anything.
Would it be correct to say that you're afraid that you may release or produce something that the ETs don't want produced?
Whatever energy it is. Like, what if it's, I mean, whatever's not human, I guess, can be considered alien, but I feel that there's an energy that's not working necessarily on the human potential side of things. It's working in the system of keeping us a little bit more in the dark. And whatever that energy is, it works through people. I don't necessarily think people are trying to stop people. I think something is trying to make them stop people. And ETs, aliens, I don't know what they are, but that is what I have felt in my career. And that would be, to me, that's the scariest thing.
Well, if people want to check out your movie, how do they do it?
You can go to www.hathorstudio.com. So that's Hathor, the Egyptian goddess, Hathor, goddess. Sorry, I got so excited about that. Hathor studio.com. And you'll find the movie. You'll find, actually, we have a couple packages. So you can buy the movie, and then you can also get the movie and all the behind the scenes. So, you know, a lot of these people have done interviews for 2 hours, but they don't make the movie. So if you want to watch every part of it, you can, there's a package for that. And then there's also, we have a conference, because we've aired the movie now, where we're going to have 10 speakers that are going to talk about the new discoveries since the movie's been finished, which is pretty cool. Because, like I said, the movie was several years ago that we shot some of this stuff, and a lot of the researchers have found more evidence and more connections, whether it's in the quantum world or ancient Egypt, or in the case of Dr. Jerry, he's actually doing more research now. So he's released that machine out, and he's got data on it when it comes to people's DNA. So this whole Code 12 conference starts October 5th, so this Sunday, and it goes for 6 weekends. So every weekend you get a couple speakers and you get to tap in. Everything's all online. And if you miss one, we'll send it to you.
Besides the conference, do you think that you'll ever create a part 2 to this movie?
Oh, God, I hope so. I mean, if more people come to the conference, I will be able to fund that. The part 2 part, I've already planned, so it's just getting funding. But part 2 for me, you'll see in this part 1, is really building the idea and connecting all the dots between our mythology and our sciences and these ancient temples and texts. But part 2 is really testing my theory with experiments. So I have certain equipment, certain places, and places that I feel that I might be able to actually prove physically what we're talking about in that documentary. So that is part 2. So if anybody's listening and wants to fund part 2, let me know.
Well, do you have anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
I cannot say what they are yet. They're still top secret.
All right. Well, if people want to reach out to you and ask you questions, are you open to that?
Of course. I love questions.
What's the best way to contact you?
You can reach me at my email. So it's Melissa, Melissa, at hathorstudios.com. That's with an S. So Hathor, Hathor, studios.com.
Melissa, before we wrap it up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
I think it's important for everybody to understand that the search for the greatest, for what defines our greatest human potential is number one. And everything that's weird, everything that's mysterious, are aliens real? Do we live in a simulation? Who built the pyramids? All of that is not really about what's out there, but who we are. And that is the greatest mystery on this planet. So really asking yourself, all these things that I'm interested in, how does that relate to me and to our species as a human? What is our human potential? And I think that if we constantly ask that question, what is the greatest human potential that we can be, by looking to all these mysteries, we're really going to figure that out. And so all I can say is keep looking to the stars, keep asking those questions, because that is the point of our journey as a human species.
Melissa, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.